needs a translation set, please get one. There'll only be a colleague from Kharkiv, Yevgeniy Zakharov, who will be speaking today Russian, but otherwise everything will go in English. I'm very happy to introduce this discussion, and my idea is to make it into more of a brainstorming session. I hope the people on the screen will come in a moment, but we'll begin with a short introduction. The previous panel in this room was on the bad guys, you know, Russia's disruptive influence in Europe. So we talked about France, Germany, the Balkans, Georgia. And now this panel, this discussion here is the brainstorming session for the good guys, you know, the Poland, the Baltics, some of the Visegrad states. So we've heard a bit about Hungary, so it's not part of the good guys, but otherwise the coalition of the good guys. And I'm very happy to be today leading this small coalition of the good guys. Introducing our colleagues and guests who are speaking here today with us. It's on my left I have Grzegorz, who's the Vice President of the Polish Humanitarian Action, one of the biggest Polish humanitarian organizations focused on many things humanitarian, but in this case very important actor in helping Ukraine. Jana Gridneva from People in Need in the Czech Republic, from the East European team lead, and another very important regional organization working on humanitarian aid, human rights, and so on. Online we'll be having Adam Roževič, who's from the Lithuanian East European Study Center. He's a policy analyst focusing especially on the region. We also have Piechowska from the Polish Institute of International Affairs in Poland. Yevgeniy Zakharov, whom I've mentioned before, from the Kharkiv Human Rights Protection Group. Marek, Hnát, I'm very happy to welcome as well, from Minister Council from the Embassy of the Slovak Republic here in Berlin. We should also be joined by Cheromukhina from the Helsinki Foundation for Human Rights in Poland in Warsaw, who's a project coordinator working on coordinating the Ukrainian program there at the foundation. And a very important guest, I'm very happy that he's joining us, and let's hope he comes on the screen. Should I be worried about the screen? Or should I not be worried about the screen? Our colleague, but otherwise they could probably be hearing us. I'm very happy to welcome Jonas Oman, who's from a Lithuanian NGO called Blue Yellow, really important Lithuanian NGO, the recent recipient of the European Citizens Prize, very actively involved in supporting Ukraine in many different ways, not only humanitarian, especially also dual use, let's call it, military aid to Ukraine. So I'm very happy to welcome him. And I think, if you don't mind, the people online and on Zoom are usually disadvantaged. So I hope that we can begin with the people online. The forum is about the strengthening links between political decision makers and civil society actors. So the way we came up with this, my idea for this is to actually talk about what happened over the last 9 months, bring in sort of to this arena, to this forum, some ideas of what has worked and what is nice. So also to brag about the activities that some of the organizations or the countries have been doing for Ukraine, and then maybe move into discussing what could be improved, or maybe nothing needs to be improved. I would be very happy to hear that everything is going extremely well and we don't have to do anything. But probably this will not be the case. Excuse my irony if anyone is offended. I think it's very good that we're meeting from different walks of life, as I said, think tanks, civil society actors, and also a representative from the embassy as well, because the civil society has proven in this Russian aggression against Ukraine they can be very helpful in welcoming refugees, giving humanitarian aid, supplying military aid, even defending human rights, and actually speaking out. And one of the most important things that we've been discussing over the 2 days is also about speaking out and changing ways conflicts are perceived within Europe. So I don't know if anyone has anything against it. I would probably ask Jonas, because he's been waiting a while, to begin with his initial remarks that I've mentioned in the email, just to briefly say what you have been doing and what has worked and what is there to maybe improve in the long term.
Yes. So hi, everybody from Vilnius. We are an NGO working since 2014. What has happened is interesting. During this Russian open aggression, we have received funds for 35 million euros approximately. We took an early decision to use it for mainly military purposes because of the seriousness of the situation, of the conflict. So we have provided all kinds of military-related things, protection gear, optics, drones, radios, and even some things I can't even talk about. So very quickly on the good side, the experience of the civil society NGOs over these 8 years of the Donbass phase of the conflict has definitely provided many capabilities to the civil society, understanding networks, skills, all kinds that actually provide the involvement of civil society in this the war and the conflict in Ukraine is tremendous, and it's very many, from a good side, from the positive side, many positive things can be said about it, and we're proudly a part of that. We're providing gear to all kinds of Ukrainian units, every single kind you can think of. We have helped them with something. So that is, and we have to be involved in the war. Basically, civil society has to be a part of the war effort. This is not only about being nice and being humanitarian. This is about a war. This is about enemy that has to be beaten, and we can tell that the Ukrainian armed forces, for all their positive parts, they still are in need. This is a very good, so to speak, additional strength and additional capacity, the involvement of civil society in the war effort in many ways. I mean, we know some of these organizations that have done tremendous work. We're doing what we are doing, and I think we are getting pretty good at it. On the weak side, quickly, is, of course, we still need to improve cooperation with, so to speak, the formal society, with authorities, with governments, with various kinds of government entities. It's still lots of things to be done, and I definitely feel almost every day the tension and the friction in this framework, especially working with say the border issues, Poland, Lithuania, Ukraine in our case, and also with government that there's still lots to be done in this, and I could talk a lot about that, but I probably leave that for later maybe. But basically, the civil society is and has to be involved in the whole range of this conflict, including the military aspects of it. That's my experience. Thank you.
Thank you. So maybe we'll go to the humanitarian aspect now, and I'll ask Grzegorz Gruca to contribute and say from the Polish perspective.
Okay, I was asked also to give a more broad perspective in terms of the cooperation with the Visegrad countries and with our Baltic states neighbors, and I think it has worked quite well. At the beginning of the just to mention that we are in Ukraine also from 2014, so we are quite aware, and also in the Donbass and Luhansk area at the gray zone, but also on the rebellion side. But I think what is important, and we have encountered this for the very first time in Ukraine, as we were mainly in the previous times operating in all over the world in conflict areas, but also after natural disasters. But it was not so obvious that the society, for us, probably for the difference of cultural differences, we were in places like Syria and Czechia also. It was the involvement of civil society also in the world effort, as the person talking before me mentioned. So we understand that there is very difficult to draw a line between what is society and what is the military activity. People wearing uniforms are in the National Guard. They protect their own citizens. So this is something that is new, and also it's new that we are working in an environment where the civil society is already in place. I'm talking about Ukraine, and we are not there to teach or show how important is civil society and why is it important to be in the civil society and build civil society organizations. But unfortunately, there are already in place mechanisms, procedures that have to be followed in order to deliver humanitarian assistance. And starting from assessment to going through procurement, etc. And it's a growing tension between the international NGOs and local NGOs, not only in Ukraine, but also in Poland, for example, because it was a moment when the majority of NGOs got involved in humanitarian or other activities, even NGOs that were doing completely different things before the war. And now they're saying, well, we are doing all those great things and we don't have the access to funds. We are not funded directly. We need the international NGOs to be in the middle of our activities. And I think, especially when we are talking about Ukrainian NGOs, we could do a lot to explain what to do in order to access those funds, because Poland, Slovakia went through that path. And we've been, I must say, I was a part of the longest 3-year project of European Union that lasted 15 years and was aiming to prepare the NGOs to join European Union in the area of development assistance and humanitarian assistance. It took us that long to understand. I mean, maybe it wouldn't take us, but the process was quite lengthy. So if Ukraine, and I'm sure Ukraine will become a part of European Union, wants to access funds, wants to use the opportunity of being in the European Union, I think that the so-called less enlargement countries could be a nice bridge to assist them in getting there and being more effective and being able to work in the European standards. Maybe that's all for now.
It's very good for a start. Maybe we'll move south slightly to Czechia, and I'll ask Jana first.
Yes, thank you very much for this opportunity. Actually, we as People in Need, the biggest organization in the Czech Republic, the biggest NGO, we are in a very special position right now because the money that we are using for support in Ukraine were fundraised by us in the Czech Republic. The biggest public collection in the history of the country happened, and so far we have gathered from the Czech citizens and Czech businesses over 83 million euro, which is like an unbelievable sum for us. And we've never had any experience of working with this kind of money that was not provided by donors. So now we're in a position that we are a donor. First, we started by sending 15 humanitarian trains to Ukraine the first days of the war, but then we okay, it should be mentioned that I do not represent our humanitarian section, but our human rights section. And in the human rights section, we have the experience and the know-how of working with civil society. And we sort of managed to combine that with the experience that our humanitarian section has. And now in Ukraine, we work exclusively through the local civil society. So we give rather flexible grants to local civil society. And our humanitarian colleagues, in cooperation with us, adopt a comprehensive approach where we try to not just give the money for further distribution of humanitarian aid and services, but also to encourage them to use these funds for their own capacity building, and which is extremely important, and we keep returning to this, and I want to emphasize this again and again. MHPSS, which is mental health and psychological support. So we also try to organize retreats and psychological support for helpers and the organizations. So at the Human Rights Department, apart from that, we also have a program that supports actors working in several key areas. We support independent media. It was, I would be really interested in hearing your experience in this, because we've worked with media, for example, that have never received previously any funding from donors. They were pure running on subscriptions or commercial sources, and now we are the first donor they work with, and we also try to, together with funding them, provide them capacity building and so on, and also MHPSS support, mental health support, meaning that, and we also, of course, support the documentation and monitoring of war crimes. About the problems that we hear again and again is basically the bureaucracy and the attitude of donors, the total sort of inability to take into the account of war situation, requests to document all the traveling expenses, for example, in a situation of war when it's absolutely impossible. So, like, we are trying, we do not really have capacities, like human capacities for that. We keep hiring, but we still don't have enough people to be this connecting element between civil society in Ukraine and decision makers on the donors level. But this process is frustratingly slow.
Thank you. Now we'll move maybe to the, I don't know if Yevgeniy is with us. I can't see him on the screen, but let's maybe see if he's joined us. If not, I'll just move on and ask Marek Hnát from the Slovak embassy to have his remarks on the way he sees already moving away from the NGO perspective, but then going into the perspective of a person on the other side, more on the receiving as we hear today.
Thank you. Firstly, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here and discuss this very, very important topic with you. The war in Ukraine has been followed very, very sensitively in Slovakia from the very beginning. Firstly, because we're a neighbor country, and second, because there is no need to build an awareness that the Ukrainians fight for us and for our values, that we all live in the EU. That's why I'm very proud to present several aspects of our support for Ukraine. First of all, we support the country with military means, direct support by military material, including our air defense system a few months ago. That brought also a new aspect into our bilateral relations with Germany, because I speak also for the embassy of Slovakia in Germany, that I have to touch this point. We were a strategic partner in politics and economy, and now this war in Ukraine, the cooperation on military, brought a very strong third pillar of security and military cooperation into our bilateral relations. Good. So that was for the military. The next area is humanitarian support. Since February this year, we have been one of the biggest supporter of Ukraine in terms, in relative terms, by GDP. By Keeler Institute for World Economy, we're on the number 8. I guess the first ranks are occupied by the Baltic States and Poland. So it also speaks about the sensitivity for the neighboring countries. Yeah, we delivered more than 700 tons of relief materials, worth more than 7 million euro. There was a European Center for Humanitarian Logistics established in Eastern Slovakia, which was founded by the European Union, and it serves to bundle, store, and transport relief supports from all EU member countries to Ukraine. Well, what's next? We're currently implementing 4 major humanitarian projects in Ukraine, and there is also a big shipment of humanitarian assistance for the winter under the buzzword winterization, which is several hundreds electricity generators and so on. So that's what we are currently working on. There's another aspect that I have to touch on. There was a huge migration wave going to Slovakia from this 24th of February. Around 900,000 Ukrainians crossed our country, which may not sound so big number compared to Poland, for example. But if you consider the size of our country, we have like 5 million population. It's really considerable. Yeah, my colleague from Poland also touched a European perspective. This is very important from our view. We see Ukraine as a European country, and we saw this from the very first moment. From the very first moment, we supported Ukraine candidate status for Ukraine, and we always say in our activities towards Ukraine, we always have to consider this European future of the country. And we need to look on the reconstruction of Ukraine also through this optics. So all the activities in reconstruction need to help or support this integration path of Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you. You mentioned on the Ukrainian question, European question, and before the discussion, we were talking with Marek from the Polish Institute of International Relations, something about the European aspect. I think it's one of the things that you also wanted to touch upon, and I'll just probably pass on.
Okay, but I'll start with trying to tell you something about what Poland has done, because it's a very nice topic for me, because something that I'm really proud of. Because really from the first hours of Russian full-scale aggression, Polish society and Poland rushed to help Ukrainian. You could see all these pictures from the border, and it was really like a massive grassroots movement. It was something unbelievable. I never could think that it could be so massive. Actually, there are some estimates that 70% of Poles got involved in helping refugees in first 3 months, and they spent for this purpose of helping refugees around more than 2 billion euros. So it's unbelievable amount of the people just spent, to help refugees, and they took the strangers to their homes. They helped how they could. People were going to the border just to take refugees from the border and make this road to the central or western Poland easier for them. And it's still right now, people maybe are not so eager to help, but it doesn't mean they are not helping. I'm not saying that we are not eager, because there is no such a big need. There's still, of course, huge need, especially for those who are refugees who are coming right now. It's you cannot see it in numbers, because a lot of people are going back to Ukraine, but still new people are coming, and there will be coming during the winter. Even if I don't expect a big wave of new refugees during this time. So just a few words about numbers. Maybe you know that more than 7 million refugees from Ukraine have been recorded across Europe. Probably, I'm not saying that most of them, but really a lot of them came through Poland. So Poland became not only a country that welcomed refugees, but also a transit country. It was a big logistic issue, and it was actually a good place for cooperation between West European countries. Right now, if you are a refugee from Ukraine coming, for example, to Warsaw, you will be offered, actually you won't be encouraged to stay in Poland, but you will be offered a transport to some Western countries. So right now we have around more than 1 million Ukrainian people who are under temporary protections. It's we have 1.4 million people who are registered in a system, but we estimate that actually there is a less, like 1.1 million people who are in Poland. But what is also important, that before the war, before this aggression started, we had around million and a half Ukrainians who are working in Poland. This labor migration, which actually started after 2014. So it was a little bit also pushed by people who were pushed out because of the war. And I told you that there was an enormous work of Polish society in helping refugees, but actually we have to remember that those millions of Ukrainians who were in Poland, they were actually the even bigger actors because they are very organized everything. And they still helping their own friends, families from Ukraine. They are hosting them at their homes. So without those community, it would not be so easy for Polish people. Poland, of course, reduced the usual border formalities just after hours of the first attack. And if you think about this border formalities, just think that also it was reduced for pets, so which was very important for families. I'm very proud of this. Maybe you can think about it, that's not very important. But if you think about these traumatized people who are just trying to travel, it was very important for them. And people get full access to the Polish benefits, to healthcare, but also they have full access to Polish labor market. Right now, we estimate that 60% of refugees aged 18-65 are actually working, and we have to remember that most of them are women with kids. Not easy for them to work if you have small kids, but the kids can go to school. Kids in Poland, of course, kids can go to nurseries and they can work, which actually is good because it's not a burden on Polish social services. I won't talk much about humanitarian help because it was already said a lot. We, of course, as Poland, as a country, as a state, we are helping, for example, building temporary houses I think it was in Borobianka, in many, places where buildings were destroyed. But Polish people are all sending, there is still a lot of this grassroots help, but people are just having friends in Ukraine, somebody saying, okay, we need this and this, and people are collecting and taking it to Ukraine, and it's really a massive scale still. And military aid, because it's something also which I'm very proud of. I won't tell you a lot because it's not our topic today, but I just want you to understand that Poland made something which was very smart. We didn't talk about it, we just made it. So around 250 Polish tanks were sent to Ukraine. A lot of different types of vehicles, artillery, UAVs, rifles, grenade launchers. I just stop here because I can go on and it's not the most important. But you have to remember that thanks to the spare parts that we gave to Ukraine, they could renovate all the Soviet aircrafts and tanks that they had, which was also a big help. And of course, now we come to this international cooperation, just because, of course, Slovakia and Czech is also on this road from Ukraine, but Poland, because of road connection, train connections, are really a biggest this hub of also for military aid, but also this humanitarian aid. Probably around 75% of this military aid goes through Rzeszów from this airport in Rzeszów, so it's a huge number. And of course, we are helping wounded soldiers, we are helping with the treatments, with rehabilitation, and so on. And just the last sentence, why Poland is doing this. Of course, maybe because we like Ukraine, but it wouldn't be true, or hold true. We just know that right now Ukraine is fighting for us, but it's also our war. And what happened yesterday, I don't know if you all know. Right now, just a few minutes ago, President Duda said that probably it was Ukrainian anti-air missile, but it doesn't matter really what kind of missile was it. The important is that it was something that happened because of Russian aggression.
Thank you. Let's move to another think tanker with us here today, to Adam Roževič in Vilnius. If you would like to just say a few words, maybe coming on from a broader perspective and contributing to what Jana said, please go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to speak in this panel. I would like to touch upon the Lithuanian broader side and how Lithuanian states reacted. And first, I would like to underline the good thing that happened and the thing that I think that we can be quite proud of. It's and that thing is not very often touched upon is the diplomatic front. I think it was crucial during the first days that we had very clear diplomatic message, and I very vividly remember how President Gitanas Nausėda, together with the Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki, visited Berlin on the 26th of February, where they tried to persuade the German side to take an active role and to have this very clear statement what is happening in Ukraine, because there were quite legitimate fears that we did not know what the Western partners will say. And the next day, after 26th of February, we had this quite remarkable and historical speech by Scholz about the Zeitenwende and how the German security basically mindset is changing 180 degrees. So I think these kind of visits and this kind of the lobbying in the foreign capitals was very much important, but nonetheless, the Lithuanian Speaker of the Parliament, Viktorija Čmilytė, visited Kiev when it actually was still semi-surrounded, when the Russians were still in Irpin and Bucha. It was on the second half of the March, and she was one of the first politicians, parliamentary politicians, foreign politicians that visited Kiev, and it showed, first of all, the very big and huge solidarity that we have with the Ukrainian cause and Ukrainian people, but it also opened the doors for Western politicians, and it showed basically that it can be done and you should go there. And from that moment, we saw that other countries also joined. We also had quite, I think, quite active parliamentary diplomacy. Our parliament members of parliament were quite active in this regard, and we had created this parliamentary coalition where the members of parliament were basically traveling to other parliaments and lobbying for the Ukrainian cause. It is very difficult to grasp the result of this diplomacy, but we still see that there were some major changes in some European capitals regarding the stance towards Russia and towards Ukrainian support. And the last but not the least, Lithuania was key partner for Ukraine in its application to become a candidate, to have this candidate status in European Union. Lithuanian diplomats and MFA worked quite extensively with the Ukrainian counterparts to fill out the form, to consult, to have this vision how to proceed further, and it was basically done by Lithuanians, and I think it was very important step that we took, and I think that we have quite succeeded in that, and it's also worth to mention all the lobbying about in the European Union and how to raise this question on the agenda. I think it was quite important. And the bad thing that happened, and I think that we still did not figure out, and I don't think it's only a Lithuanian problem, but it's also more of a Eastern Europe problem, that we still have not found the way how to stop some NATO and Western countries to procrastinate regarding the armaments for Ukraine. We saw that with each month a lot of the things that were said not to be shipped to Ukraine, they are shipped, but they are already too late. And one of the best examples is the modern air defense systems. There were quite good arguments that it takes some time to learn to operate those systems, but if that decision was made much earlier, we could see we could have saved basically a lot of Ukrainian lives in the Ukrainian cities that are bombed practically every week with the cruise and ballistic missiles. So I think this will be one of the key challenges for Eastern Europe and Central Europe to figure out how to persuade our Western partners to bring more serious stuff to Ukraine, and on much faster notice. We saw a lot of backtracking about the aircraft. We saw a lot of backtracking regarding the tanks. There's quite bad communication and public relations from some Western countries where they did not still have a clear line what they're going to do, and there's a lot of consultations going on. But I think that it will be a key mission for us to learn and invent this magical way how to stop some countries to basically procrastinate their decision. And on the brighter side, talking about the direct shipments to Ukraine, Lithuania has extensively supported Ukraine in the armaments, even though our defense budget is quite small and our armed forces are not very big, but we still donated quite a lot of important equipment. Even before the war, we delivered some Stinger man-pads, even though they were older versions, but they still had this effect of breaking the ice in the ice of some Western countries. And not to mention, the last week we also announced that we are sending quite a lot of the armored personnel carriers and M113, even though they are quite old platforms. But what we are seeing in this artillery war, the APCs are of very great importance. And I will not mention various smaller stuff like ammunition, AKs or mortars, but there was still quite significant number of armaments sent from Lithuania, and even now we can feel that there is a growing discussion in Lithuania to what extent we can deplete our defensive capabilities and ship those to Ukraine, because we can see that our warehouses are not infinite, and there is some calculations already being done how much we can send further. So, and I think I'll stop here.
Thanks. So now it's time to do a review. I mean, as every good, nothing about us without us. And we'll move to Yevgeniy Zakharov from the Kharkiv Human Rights Protection Group, who can maybe briefly say how he sees this region that I said is, I mean, we the greatest countries, the good guys when it comes to supporting Ukraine, when it comes to supporting, you know, lots of people from civil society organizations, happy, smiling about arms deliveries and so on. I'll just now maybe ask Yevgeniy to give his take on it, and Yevgeniy will be speaking in Russian, so if any of you need a translation, please put on your earphones.
Thank you, Laurynas. Thank you very much for having the possibility to be with you. I'm happy to have electricity at the moment, and the internet works more or less. I hope that there won't be any interruptions. At first, I would like to express our great gratitude for the enormous support that we have received so far. The Ukrainians living here received a lot of support from the countries that you are representing today: Poland, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Lithuania, Estonia. This is a large, enormous support, and I I also work as a volunteer and deliver goods between Poland and Ukraine, and I've seen that volunteers are doing a lot of work. The people understand how difficult it is and how difficult it is for the large number of Ukrainian refugees to leave their country. They are often left without money, without any of their commodities, of their belongings, but they received a lot of support. And you can believe me that we very highly estimate the support we received. Now I would like to speak about something different, about something that is usually not talked about at such meetings. You know, it is not normal to criticize your government in times of war. However, I think that there are certain people in our country who sometimes support even the aggressor, and I think this is something we have to talk about. I would like to draw your attention to the fact that our country was not able to completely change within 9 months. Of course, it stayed the way it was. It is a corrupt country, it is a poor country. We don't have a normal market situation because the market is controlled by corruption as well, and the fight against corruption that we have been leading meant that we should put to jail a lot of people. However, this fight is not going on at the moment, and this is a very big mistake. We don't have a normal market, we don't have normal competition. A lot of our companies are directly connected to the government, and unfortunately this is continuing even in times of war. We can see that. Normally, the EU is asking for, includes the free travel of goods and services. However, I don't know how this is going to be implemented in Ukraine. And then we also have a mental problem in Ukraine. We have a lot of state property when it comes to land, and a lot of our areas belong to the state, and this is connected to laws that were adopted in 2017, and I want that, of course, that Ukraine will become a full-scale member of the EU. However, it will have to change a lot in order to do that. We see a lot of lies that are disseminated. We see a lot of xenophobia in our country, and the Baltic states, which had a similar history as Ukraine, and people who are older very well understand what a Soviet past and the Soviet totalitarianism meant to the people. This is something that unfortunately has turned into real fascism in Russia today. And you shouldn't forget, you should remind our government about the fact that Ukraine can only become a free country if it's going to accept the standards of liberal democracy and human rights. Because at the moment it is a very primitive and collectivist country and hasn't reached the European level yet. The European Charter of Human Rights, which was adopted also on the basis of the Copenhagen Agreement, is something that we haven't reached yet.
And still should be supporting also capacity building within Ukraine and supporting these European values that we talk about. So maybe I'll just now go to the other round that that we said, you know, issues and how can this be improved? More of a brainstorming thing, something that you would like to bring onto the table and sort of suggest how can it be improved. I think from the first round, I identified and noted out a few issues. I think one of them is the attitude of donors, cooperation with the state actors, transport logistics. That's as one thing, you know, the formality, you know, the formal state that we each of us have to go with and deal with. On the other hand, I think the colleagues from NGOs and working in humanitarian aid capacity building have mentioned that they themselves need to consider and think about how our sectors can be improved in terms of capacity building and human resource shortages. Another thing I think it's interesting to also mention and came up in a few talks is grassroots initiatives, just grassroots from our civil society, people living in our countries, and how this can be strengthened, maybe institutionalized at times. Another thing, fourth point that came up is about lobbying and being a loud voice in Europe, in the European Union, and putting on this pressure on our partners so that they can't procrastinate. And then finally, the fifth point that Yevgeniy mentioned is how we can, despite these difficult conditions of war, we're really supporting, sending arms, sending humanitarian aid, helping with the, you know, in psychology and refugee issues and so on. How can we still support state building even in these very, very difficult conditions? So I think if any one of you would like to go ahead, I can ask you just either to raise your hand on the screen maybe, or just put up the name tag so I can ask you to give a voice, or otherwise I'll just make you say things. Does anyone want to say anything? Nobody wants to say anything?
If no one, I think that the role of the civil society would be to, as I said, help our Ukrainian friends to prepare for a long, I hope it will be short, but as I look at the Polish example, to fulfill all the requirements of the European Union. And things will be difficult, but we don't have to invent all the procedures, we don't have to invent all the ways that we would be going. And I think that the government also needs the civil society in order to criticize, in order to look at their hands, because this is the role of civil society. And as soon as, I know it's difficult in a work condition to accept that someone is criticizing you when you are fighting an enemy, but I think this is something that has to happen. And already a very vibrant civil society in Ukraine and now has even a bigger role to play as the leader at the front of the accession to the European Union. I think we can, as I said, the European states, the former accession states, can be much of a help, and we want to, and I can only declare that with the partners in Ukraine we are working, we are giving them the capacity trainings, and I think they're learning very fast, and I see this as a good story to happen in the future.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that what we see a lot, and what I kind of commented on before, is that donors and state actors have this tendency to treat civil society actors, and not only in Ukraine, because I have to add that we also provide support to civil society who supports refugees in Moldova and in Romania. And in all these countries, we try to adopt this holistic approach when we work through local civil society and simultaneously try to provide them capacity building and all kinds of institutional support. And what we see that this is not something that happens a lot, that donors tend to treat civil society as implementers tend to instrumentalize them, just treating them as just like a body for delivering a certain amount of services. And this is not an empowering strategy. And this is not a way to sort of help build a healthier civil society atmosphere. And also just kind of like a remark, on the corruption and anti-corruption efforts by donors. Basically, we all know that all these extremely complex reporting procedures, they all have this one goal to fight corruption and to make sure that the funds are used in the manner that they're supposed to be used. And this is extremely important. But I think it's time, all of us, and that we also face this problem as an organization that is a donor organization sometimes, to revise our own processes and to make sure that they do fulfill this watchdogging-like function, but simultaneously do not hinder these organizations from developing and from fulfilling their most important functions, and do not take agency from them, so they can do what they want and not what we in the Czech Republic and Prague think they should do. Yes.
Anyone else feels like going? Maybe Jonas, you.
Yes, I can say something. Thanks for the last remark. I definitely agree to that. It's a tendency that civil society in Ukraine and I guess similar countries is being perceived as an instrument for whatever purposes. We have experienced over and over and over again, for instance, that we have been limited for some reason by officials, and then the very same official come, in the back door and ask us for supporting this or that, and it's actually sometimes it's like a dark comedy sometimes when you see these things. And I definitely see this conflict brewing in Ukraine, because we are seeing some extremely serious players on the civil society end. Some of them, I suspect, with political ambitions in the future. And this rather cautious look at them from the authorities. And again, with these like dark comedy plays playing out all the time. Where I can give you one example. At one point, I was asked by the military intelligence of Ukraine to provide javelins. I'm not kidding you, for various purposes, and also some other very, very strange over these months for specific reasons. I guess we have to I talk now as a civil society representative. This is a war, this is a conflict with two sides. We always have to fight, we have a real enemy. On the one hand, we're fighting the Russian Federation together with everybody else. On the other hand, I definitely see the need for civil society in this context is to stay put, not to think that when the war is over, when everything, this is gonna, something's gonna turn out into something positive or whatever. This is not going to happen. We have to be there. We have to be there during the reconstruction phase. We have to do develop best practices, and we have to be ready, which is kind of a contradiction here. On the one hand, we have to create ways to cooperate with the authorities, but on the other hand, we have to be prepared to fight them at the same time, which is extremely. I think anybody involved understand what I'm trying to say here. It's very Ukrainian, put it that way. But it's also something that we have to realize that this is going to take a long time. We are planning in our organization. We are planning for a 10-year ahead. Be there a war if Ukraine wins, if there be some kind of standoff, some other kind of situation. We have reconstruction. We have to be there. And I start to see this need to stay put. and to change, of course, if we have to provide drones for dropping bombs on the head of the Russians, we will do that. If we have to build schools, we will do that. But we have to stay put. It's very, very important for many, many reasons. And we have to be friends with the authorities, and we have to fight them at the same time. Thank you.
Okay, I just want to stress one of the main threat to civil society right now. In Poland, because, well, I should be more specific. So right now, people are really exhausted. People are really tired of this. You know, it was really a lot of months of hard work, and most of them were not paid enough, and so on. People just made it because they felt it's very important. And we have also these people who are maybe not so much involved, but they are feeling this pressure that they have to do something. I mean, about like in these first weeks, we had this huge movement of Polish people, you know, and wanted to help. And even if it only lasted for a few weeks for most of the people, still people are very tired. And right now is this fragile moment when Russian disinformation can really strike into it. And I'm really worried, especially what's happened yesterday, that Russia, it's already starting to spread this disinformation that's a Polish provocation to grab Lviv, you know, and things. Of course, Polish society right now is very resilient, really. Right now, it was something unexpected to me too, that since this February, Polish society is amazingly resilient to this Russian disinformation. But right now, when people are tired, when people are just having their own problems with, you know, crisis, which we all feel in whole Europe, people will be more, you know, fragile to this Russian disinformation. And actually, it's a burden for civil society too, because first of all, they will be the target for this disinformation, but they are the agent who should also fight with this disinformation. So it'll be another burden. And to be honest, I don't know how to help people. I don't know how to support those activists, but I know it's very important to do right now.
I see Adam has raised his hand. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to maybe touch upon very similar point that my colleague just said, but more from a little bit from another perspective. And we can see that already happening in Lithuania, that people are not only getting tired by the fact that there is a war going on and they need to do something, they need to donate, they need to help refugees and so on, and do quite a lot of NGOs work. But I think that the economic reasons will be also quite crucial this winter. And I think this will be a very big test for Europeans, how they will basically keep the support going on when the energy prices are quite high, when the inflation is quite high, and we see that there is quite pessimistic prognosis for the economic growth for the next year. And this job to keep the support, the public support, will not only should be left on the shoulders of the state or media, but I think the work of activists, the work of NGOs, and just keeping the rhythm, keeping the agenda quite active, and saying that even though that you need to pay for gas is, well, it's bad that we need to pay more, but we are still just paying more for the gas. We're not paying how the price that the Ukrainians are paying right now. So to reignite this new trend in public, I think it will be quite important. And in some states it will be even more important than in Eastern Europe. I think like Germany, France, and so on, it will be crucial. And we saw that there was quite heavy protests during the first week of the war, but right now there are not a lot of protests, and those protests, I think, they had influence on how politicians reacted, with, for example, freezing the central bank reserves and so on. So keeping the rhythm and keeping the agenda, even though people are tired and getting a little bit less money, it will be quite important.
Thank you. But I know that I've been informed that we will have to be wrapping up in a minute, but if anyone would like to hear in the hall or online have a slight comment, I'm very happy to take if you have any questions or anything to. Who's there? Okay, so Susanna Müller, if you'd like to ask a question from online, let's see if we can organize that. Now the hand is down. Nothing happens. Okay, so let's go ahead. Maybe then now I'll just do a sort of a final round of remarks. Oh, Tim. Yes, Tim Böse from Austausch would like to ask a question, and I'll run to him and give the microphone. He's from Germany, and we love German bashing.
Here was this talk about advocacy work in Western European countries to avoid procrastination, and hearing your statements, I understood that a lot of you speakers are involved in this process, and I would like to thank you. And I think this is really, really important work. I can make a point that it is a Polish institute, the Pilecki Institute, that is based in Berlin, actually focusing its work on informing about Polish history, explaining Polish culture in a German context. And they provided a platform for Ukrainian diaspora organizations starting in February and enabling them to work in the German public. And this is extremely effective. This is extremely helpful because the Ukrainian organizations and groups play a strong role to explain Ukraine, to highlight the problems of German perceptions of Ukraine in this region. And here you have a very good example of a Polish institution engaging and helping to have an improvement. Yeah, and we have this upcoming winter. Yeah, I think, and I think it will be important to think about how this winter how we get through this winter, how we can create some kind of winter of solidarity in the situation, and how we can maybe think together how we can improve structures that will help us to support Ukraine not only in this winter, but in the upcoming spring and in the summer and in the upcoming time. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim, for again another nice word, and all the nice things that we do. But I think we managed to get a list of Oh, sorry.
I'm Eva Küstrup from Berlin, former member of the European Parliament for the Greens and active since many years in women, peace and ecology groups. And I want to follow Tim just with a proposal. So I think that we need a sort of rhythm in our actions and problems coming with this winter, that we need long plans like we heard with the 10 years in Kharkiv and Ukraine. And I'm very thankful to Mr. Zakharov that I heard your voice and can give it into the European debate, that we should strengthen civil society and possibility of democratic critics from below, especially during wartime, and not a tendency, as we all have to be a collective against Putin's war and propaganda now, there is no more inner critics allowed. So I'm very thankful to you. I think that we need a first step to go till Christmas time and the New Year. It sounds very easy, but I think all that German society, Polish society, part of society will look for Christmas, or people with children. Then the churches are there, and then the consumer industries, they are all looking for Christmas even now. Why should we not think about how civil society, as a European civil society, including Ukraine, could be present within Christmas time? Because it goes very deep to the question of peace and family and survival and all the values we are fighting for, and not leave that to Bishop Kirill and others. The other thing is there's the 10th of December, and the peace movement in the 80s, which was cooperating with civil rights groups like Charter 77 and Solidarność in the 80s, that peace movement had chosen the 10th of December as an action day together. That's a day for human rights. And I think maybe we can have an idea how we can be present all together on the 10th of December, saying the Day for Human Rights is not just an official UN day. And we could even do a coalition with the Iranian opposition movement, because they have the issue of energy too, because they have this theocracy with the oil in Iran. And some of them, I saw them in rallies here, are doing solidarity with Ukraine. So why couldn't we make a sort of bigger political European coalition with protest movement and saying, we look for alternative energies, we look for solidarity within the energy crisis, we are standing for human rights and anti-war on the 10th of December. And that you just have the information, there is a lobby for Ukraine within the European Parliament, and the pressure group within is coming from Eastern Europe, from Baltic states, but they could be an intermediate voice for you too.
The technician is behind you, so.
Okay. I have a question for our colleagues from Poland. So I'm a journalist, and I have to be critical about our media in Germany, because normally we are very focused on PiS party, Kaczynski, the stress or the problems between European Union and Poland. So what you told us, I find it very interesting, and it inspires me to report, because we have a correspondent in Warsaw. But my question is, your work, for instance, or the whole engagement concerning the war in Ukraine, does it have a connection to the civil society in Poland? I mean, do you already notice some changes, or it's very interesting? I would like to have some remarks, if there are some.
You mean, do we see the change in the government, or do we see the change in the society?
In the civil society.
Well, my colleague already mentioned that people are already tired with the situation, and economically, we are having around 18% of inflation. So even just to sustain the people that are in Poland is becoming more and more difficult. Well, we had a tremendous amount of money coming from the Polish population, so we can still go on with our projects. But I think also the government is acknowledging that the fact that how Poland reacted to the war was a turning point, how Poland is being perceived in the Western countries, because we had this huge issue with the refugees on the Belarus border, which then completely changed the optics of the Polish society. So this is very important. I think the government somehow was involved in the sense that the legal framework for the Ukrainians had been voted and is quite, I would say, friendly. And so we have to acknowledge this. But of course, now we will see how, because already now the government is now introducing at least partially payments for the people in collective centers. I said that from the beginning of next year, people will have to paying for their presence there, partially, but still. So I think this, and we have to remember that the refugee status was granted for the Ukrainians in Poland for 18 months. So we are like 18. So we are like 8 months already in the process. and this will be very interesting. The government wants to receive funds from EU for the assistance that we've delivered to the Ukrainians, and they have received some money. I think 1 billion of zlotys they have, and they will be still looking forward to see more involvement from the European Union in terms of fresh money, because this is also important that it's being said.
Yevgeniy, go ahead. Oh, okay, he's on.
Thank you. Just a very short thing. It is very obvious that Russia is trying to destroy the energy infrastructure of Ukraine and to leave us without electricity and water and without heat. And this is, of course, connected to electricity. And this was even announced publicly. So Putin is even publicly documenting his crimes. He said that we gave the order to do that. I am saying this because part of the humanitarian help, well, it would make sense if you gave Ukraine as many generators as possible, because they can, to a certain extent, substitute for the destroyed electricity networks. And this could a little bit alleviate the consequences of the bombings. Of course, we also need water and heat, but I think that it is very necessary to get these generators, because without them, the inhabitants of big cities will completely stay without electricity, water, and heat. They won't have any other way than leaving their houses, and this will lead to another big influx of refugees, which is also a large burden on European countries. Because otherwise, people will freeze and they will have to leave their homes and their cities. So generators are the only possibility for them to stay there. And it is also necessary to draw the international attention to the fact that there are many war crimes going on in Ukraine. We have to collect evidence on them and put people to trial who committed them. I think we should, at the moment, think about the worst possible situation in order to prepare best for what is ahead of us. And again, I would like to say that with electricity, we have the biggest problem at the moment.
Yes, a quick remark. We have provided soon over 100 generators to Kherson, to Kharkiv, this we got, yes, just go. This is actually happening right now. I'm just sending off a car with 57 generators to Kherson today. So yes, this is like action speaks more than words. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think it's a very good conclusion for the group of people that's here. Action speaks more than words, and let's get to action. I will transfer your words into a few conclusions for the organizers, and thank you very much for being with us. Thank you for engaging in this discussion. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the time that you used to actually speak with us, and let's go back to action. Thank you.